Today we're going to rank every single evolution in Clash Royale from worst to best. Starting off with the worst Evo in the game, the Goblin Drill. The Goblin Drill is actively being discussed at how it can be reworked because it is the clearest Evo that just makes the drill worse. Like, there's no other Evo that just clearly, every single time you play it, makes it worse, because the Goblin Drill usually gets you no extra damage, because what counters the Goblin Drill usually counters the entire Goblin Drill. It can even activate the King Tower, and also with 38 evolutions in the game now, there are plenty of better options to put in your Goblin Drill deck, like Snowball, and just pretty much everyone has more of an impact. Unfortunately, the Bomber is currently out of the meta, and also is a walking King Tower activation, and usually isn't, if it's not being used in normal decks, it's not going to be used as an Evo. Like, you're not even going to play the card, period. The Bomber, just not a great card right now, not great against the current things in the meta, given there was literally no bait in the meta. Upcoming, do we think the Bomber is going to be good? Because this is the problem we ran into last month, where literally 2 days before I made the, or 2 days after I made the Evo ranking, the Witch turned into one of the best things of all time. We're trying not to do that again, and we're definitely not going to see that with the Bomber. Okay, now this is a little bit of a stretch. I'm projecting the Goblin Giant just falls off a complete cliff. Now, the reason for this being his decks have been just nerfed to the ground. The entire Goblin Machine P.E.K.K.A deck has been nerfed pretty much. Goblin Giant himself received 3 separate nerfs. In case you didn't know, check out my balance changes video. Next up are Barbarians. If they're not good in a beatdown meta, they're not going to be good anywhere else. And I don't really know if it's the Goblin Machine Rockets that were stopping the barbs, the fact that pretty much every support push, like Baby Drag being in the meta, Witch being in the meta, just completely slaughter barbs, that are making them this bad, but they were one of the worst Evos in the game last season. Now, they can do things occasionally, but again, as we get more and more and more Evos, decks that used to use one of these cards just to use an Evo can now usually just use their normal variants because they now have extra Evos. You can consider this as the barbs used to be used a lot back when there were 10 Evos because you wanted to use Evos in your deck. Now there's plenty of better options, and the Barbarians oftentimes aren't even used as a card because they're not very good, especially against what's currently dominating the meta, and at least so far this season, they don't look getting any better. Now, the Archers are an Evo that I think get a lot better based on the meta, and currently they're not very good, especially because their #1 deck, X-Bow, is just completely fallen out of the meta. We had X-Bow and like E-Golem, Goblin Machine, Night Witch as 2 decks that people were using Archers consistently in. Now, if X-Bow has just fell off a cliff, given that was because of the broken beatdown meta, you kind of have Archers just sitting here being used by nobody. Although, in theory, they can still get a lot of value and do still get a lot of value. It's just, you also have to play the base Archers, and nobody wants to do that. Bats could be a card that jumps up this list a lot, given the current meta looks like it's going to be more healthy for bait, mortar bait, recruits, stuff like that. The current bats are just not very strong, again, with the same plight that the barbs have of Witch, Baby Dragon, Furnace, Valkyrie even, killing bats. And it's just kind of, bats are like, you know, why would I play an Evo that's just gonna die instantly? Given that they do heal up sometimes, yeah, but they also still are really susceptible to the current cards that are extremely good in the meta. And it's too early to tell if those cards like Furnace, Baby Drag, Witch are gonna be really bad, because it doesn't look like they are. So bats still in a rough spot, even though they could probably come back into the use rate if Mortar gets better. Now, the Hunter Evo is interesting. It's another card that I think could very well, over the course of the season, based on how the meta unfolds out, jump up the list a lot. Now, is this going to make him top 10? No. Top 20? Possibly. Right now, Royal Giant is just, it hasn't been very good. It was barely usable last end season, just a few days ago, and right now, the Hunter as a whole is kind of just used in one deck, and that's Royal Giant. And if there's a super broken Evo like the Witch that did just get nerfed, which is affecting the rankings, the Hunter's not going to be used. The Hunter's not going to be used, but he is going to be good as long as Royal Giant's cycle is good. So if that creeps back into the meta, I see both the Hunter and the Royal Giant getting much better than they were last season. Right now, though, Hunter's still up in the air. Wizard is a really fun Evo that I think, based off of the meta, can get a lot better. He's just, you know, the plight of the Wizard is still the same. Very expensive, doesn't often live up to his value, is easy enough to kill by most of the cards in the game. The shield negates this, however, it is still kind of clunky to try and get a Wizard in your deck, and a lot of people can't do it, and that's why his use rate is low, his win rate is low. There's not really any decks that have Wizard just as one of the core cards. He's kind of like this just fun Evo you goof around with if you're trying to counter the meta. Next up is Dark Goblin. Now, Dark Goblin is really interesting because he's a very good card, and that's kind of a big part of affecting his ranking. If he's really good on his own, and we've got 37 other Evos that we could consider using, we'll probably use those. So that's why you see a lot of bait players currently using something like the Valkyrie and the Barrel, because Barrel's kind of a necessity, being it's your win condition, or maybe they use Wall Breakers, maybe they use Skeleton Barrel. It really depends on the deck. The main thing is Dark Goblin is a really, really good card, and oftentimes the Evo needs to have him stay alive to get value, and he doesn't end up staying alive given that he dies to things like Log, so many spells in the game, and really, he does it all himself. He doesn't need an Evo, and you can save yourself an Evo slot for something better when you don't use the Dark Goblin Evo. DDK just got a nerf in the recent balance changes. This was really a bonus HP buff that they gave him way back when to make him a little more viable. It's now gone, and the cage has just gotten a little worse. Now, I wouldn't let the stats just lie to you about this. They do say cage is one of the better Evos in the game, but again, that's kind of because it's only being used in recruits, and really, recruits just kind of doesn't have anything else to put in the deck. Like, cage is just there, and the Evo does something sometimes, but I mean, it's kind of the only other option they have, so they just play the cage because they have to play the cage Evo, just because why would you use one Evo? The cage is just, it's cool in theory, dies too easily, and the Brawler, now that he doesn't do anything extra special, is just the same as the normal cage, which is really not the most viable building in the game. Battle Ram is an extremely fun Evo that kind of just completely depends on the meta. Now, this is the card that's a niche. I mean, Bridge Spam's already pretty niche in the meta right now, and you're not going to see any normal decks running Battle Ram unless they're P.E.K.K.A. Bridge Spam or a few weird off-meta Bridge Spam decks. You usually have to be pretty good and know what you're doing to use those properly, which is, you know, obviously the more no skill the Evo, the higher up the list it goes. But the Battle Ram, it's cool. It behind a tank can get pretty significant value. If you don't have the right counter for it, it can absolutely ruin your day. And it's a pretty solid Evo. It's just not used that much. Doesn't have too much success in mid-ladder and stuff like that. So it's honestly not one of the best Evos in the game. Inferno Dragon, like the Hunter, is an Evo that I could possibly see moving up the list. Another issue with this is Vines. Vines just complete, you know, you put an eye drag down, it gets vined, and the mini P.E.K.K.A. kills your eye drag. That's not too fun, and it also fully resets it. So it was kind of the bane of the card's existence, the Vines. Now that they got nerfed, I still think they're a usable card, but I mean, Inferno Dragon shouldn't be as affected now that Vines probably won't be in literally half of every game in Clash Royale. But the Inferno Dragon, I mean, it's still a niche card. You don't have too many decks actually running Inferno Dragon. For those of you who do, I think you're going to have a much better time now, given that the Vines will no longer be insta-killing this card. E-Dragon has been in the cellar for, I think, like 3 consecutive months. It's been pretty bad. Actually, it moved up a little bit last month. But the E-Drag is just, I mean, in a beatdown meta, it's going to be more viable. And I get the Vines are a thing, but Vines aren't as effective against the E-Drag as they are the I-Drag, because, of course, he can just get back up and chain. He doesn't need to recharge again. But in a beatdown meta, E-Drag's going to be pretty successful. You know, the decks with E-Drag in it got a little bit better, too. So E-Drag, well, not the best Evo in Clash Royale, did do very well against that last meta, and I mean, they might fall back a little bit in this current meta upcoming if there's no beatdown, but I mean, Golem should still be decent depending on the deck. Lumberloon should still be a good option in mid-ladder, stuff like that. So you Dragon in a decent place. I really don't know where to rank the Tesla, because 1 month it's a top 10 Evo in the game, and now it's just like, I mean, Expo is dead, so, I mean, maybe it won't be in this upcoming meta, but in the last meta, it was completely dead, unusable. Tesla is just an Evo that, it's good in a couple cycle decks, but there are so many different variations of Evo combos in cycle decks that you really just can't pinpoint, oh, like if I have a Tesla in my deck, it's probably because there's a certain matchup I'm trying to counter, and, you know, there's so many variables that go into top ladder decks, it's really hard to judge if the Tesla is that good or if people are just trying to counter a certain deck, you know? But Tesla is a solid Evo option. It's a decent building. It doesn't have too much synergy. Like, you can't just slap a Tesla in most decks because they usually do need that synergy. But Tesla overall does okay, is currently not as good because its main deck isn't very good. Musketeer is a very fun Evo, and I think if fans 2.9 balloon cycle is better in the current meta, then it will get a lot better because, again, it's something that I do like to tell mid-ladder players to try and experiment if you have the Musketeer Evo in your deck, because it allows for a lot of outplay potential, allows you to beat things you wouldn't normally beat. But I mean, Balloon Cycle is a deck that's a little bit tricky to pick up, and I think that that's the case when you see Fan as the only, like the best player of the deck is the only player running the deck on top ladder, and maybe there's a couple stragglers, you know, doing their best too, but that shows me that the deck isn't actually that amazing. It's just the player that's really good, and so I'm not willing to rate the Musketeer Evo much higher until I see it consistently used. Like, it's just in one meta deck, and it's only one player. So while I understand the outplay potential and all that stuff, and I do like the Musketeer Evo in theory, I can't rate it much higher. There's no reason to. Mortar is set to appear like it's going to make a comeback in the next meta. Now, Mortar, alongside Bait, Mortar Bait should be getting a lot better. I think it didn't receive too many nerfs, and the decks that were kind of hard countering it should be phasing out of the meta. So Mortar, while not a top 10 Evo by any means, it's definitely fell off a lot. Used to be like brain damagingly good, is now just a solid deck that I think if you one trick the deck, you'll have some success with, and I think we'll see a lot more Mortar this season. So this is another Evo that could definitely jump up the list. I'm keeping it in relatively the same spot as it was last season, just because, you know, I'm not going to call it a top 15 Evo before it's a top 15 Evo, but keep an eye on it. Could definitely move up.